Picture this: paradise. Crystal blue water, white sand beaches. The kind of place people save for years to visit. The kind of place where honeymoons are supposed to begin. But when police arrived at this luxury resort, they weren't greeting newlyweds. They were processing a crime scene. 2 people were dead. Bodies discovered in what was supposed to be a romantic getaway suite. And at the center of it all, a man who had just gotten married days earlier. Here's the twist that sent shockwaves through investigators. His wife was never there. The woman lying dead in that honeymoon suite, she wasn't his bride. Her husband went on their honeymoon without her, taking his mistress instead. 2 people would never come back. The resort staff had no idea. The other guests had no idea. They saw a couple checking in, laughing, holding hands, looking every bit like newlyweds celebrating their future together. But the real bride? She was thousands of miles away, waiting for her husband to return from what he told her was a business trip. Now, I want you to think about something for a moment. Pause and really consider this. What would you do if you discovered your spouse went on your honeymoon with someone else? How would you even begin to process that level of betrayal? Keep that question in mind, because this story gets darker, much darker. But the wedding had already happened.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.
Let's rewind 6 days. The ceremony was beautiful. Everything you'd expect from a couple deeply in love, or at least that's what everyone believed. She stood at the altar in her white dress, eyes filled with tears of joy. He held her hands, looking into her eyes, speaking vows that promised forever. Family and friends watched, some wiping away their own tears. "I promise to love you, honor you, cherish you for all the days of my life." The words hung in the air like sacred truth. They'd been dating for 2 years. He was charming, successful, attentive. She felt like the luckiest woman alive. Her friends envied what she had, a man who seemed perfect, who treated her like a queen, who couldn't wait to start their lives together. During the reception, they talked about the honeymoon. She was so excited, she could barely contain it. A tropical resort, 10 days of pure bliss, just the 2 of them. But then he said something that seemed insignificant at the time. "Actually, babe, I need to handle some work stuff first. Important client meeting I can't reschedule. I'll fly out for that, then meet you at the resort 3 days later. We'll still have a full week together." She was disappointed but understanding. He worked hard. That's how he could afford the life they were building. 3 days wasn't the end of the world. "Just promise you'll make it worth the wait," she said playfully. "I promise," he replied, kissing her forehead. "You won't be disappointed." The reception continued. Dancing, laughter, cake cutting, all the traditional moments that mark the beginning of a marriage. She had no idea she was already being betrayed. No idea that the work trip was a lie. No idea that in less than a week, her husband would be at the center of a double homicide investigation. Before we move forward, I want to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they'd been lying to you the entire time? Drop a comment and let me know, because what's coming next shows just how deep deception can run. What the bride didn't know: the honeymoon plans were already changing. While the bride was planning her wedding, her future husband was living a double life. The mistress had been in the picture for 8 months. She was younger, free-spirited, nothing like his fiancé. Where his bride-to-be was traditional and family-oriented, planning their future with careful precision, the mistress represented something else entirely: spontaneity, excitement, an escape from responsibility. They'd met at a conference. One conversation led to drinks. Drinks led to dinner. Dinner led to a hotel room. And from there, it spiraled into something neither of them seemed willing to end. To the mistress, he painted himself as trapped in a relationship that was going nowhere. "I'm only still with her because breaking up feels complicated," he'd say. "But you're who I really want to be with." To his fiancée, he was the devoted partner, counting down the days until their wedding, talking about children and mortgage payments and growing old together. Two completely different stories, two completely different versions of himself. The mistress knew about the wedding. He told her it was just a formality, something he had to do to avoid drama with family, but that it didn't mean anything. After the wedding chaos dies down, I'll end it properly, he promised her. Just give me time. She believed him, or maybe she wanted to believe him. Either way, she stayed. And then, 3 weeks before the wedding, he made an offer that shocked even her. Come with me on the honeymoon. She laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. But he was serious. I'll tell her I have a work trip right after the wedding. We'll go together. 10 days, just us, in paradise. No hiding, no sneaking around. We deserve that. Think about that for a second. Really think about it. The audacity of that plan. The level of betrayal required to even conceive of such an idea. And here's the part that makes it even more disturbing. She agreed. She knew he was married. She knew his bride was at home, believing her husband was on a business trip. And she went anyway. In the days leading up to the trip, they texted constantly, planning their outfits, talking about which restaurants to visit, fantasizing about having an entire resort suite to themselves. Meanwhile, his wife was packing her own suitcase, counting down the days until she could join her husband for what she believed would be the trip of a lifetime. Two women, two completely different realities, one man orchestrating it all. Now pause for a moment. I want to know what you're thinking. If you were a friend of either of these women and somehow found out what was happening, would you tell them? Would you get involved or stay silent? Comment below. I'm genuinely curious where you draw the line. Then he made a decision that would change everything.
The flight took off on schedule. He texted his wife from the airport.
Landed safely. Meetings tomorrow. Miss you already. Can't wait to see you in 3 days. She replied with heart emojis and a photo of herself in their apartment, already wearing one of the new outfits she'd bought for the trip. He pocketed his phone and turned to the woman sitting next to him in first class. The mistress. They smiled at each other like teenagers getting away with something forbidden. When they arrived at the resort, the staff greeted them with champagne and flower garlands. "Welcome, and congratulations on your marriage," the concierge said warmly. He didn't correct them, neither did she. They checked into the honeymoon suite, the same suite his wife believed she'd be staying in just days later. The room overlooked the ocean, with a king-sized bed covered in rose petals, a bottle of champagne on ice, and a balcony that opened to the sound of waves. For the first 2 days, it was everything they'd imagined. They lounged by the pool, had couples massages, took sunset photos that they'd never be able to post publicly. Other guests at the resort assumed they were newlyweds. The staff called them by the reservation name, his real name and his wife's last name, which he'd used to book everything. The mistress found it thrilling at first. The secrecy, the risk, the fact that they were literally living in his wife's place. But by day 3, something shifted. She started asking questions. When are you actually going to leave her? Why did you really go through with the wedding if you knew you wanted to be with me? What happens when we get back and you go home to her? He deflected, made jokes, changed the subject, ordered another round of drinks, but she wouldn't let it go. The questions became arguments, the arguments became fights. Resort staff later reported hearing raised voices coming from the suite on the 4th night, then again on the 5th. A neighboring guest mentioned hearing what sounded like things being thrown. On the 6th day, the couple barely spoke. They ate breakfast in silence. She spent hours by herself on the beach. He drank alone at the bar. And that evening, something happened that would shatter the illusion completely. His wife called. He stepped out onto the balcony to answer, thinking the mistress was in the shower. But she wasn't. She was standing right there, listening to every word. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice suddenly warm, affectionate, completely different from how he'd been speaking to the mistress. "Yeah, the meeting went well. I'll be wrapping up tomorrow, then I'll fly straight to meet you. I can't wait. I've missed you so much." The mistress stood frozen, watching him perform love for someone else, while standing in a honeymoon suite he'd shared with her for 6 days. When he hung up, she confronted him. "You're never going to leave her, are you?" He didn't answer. That silence said everything. The fight that followed was explosive, louder than any before. Guests in nearby rooms heard screaming, objects crashing, doors slamming. Hotel security was called twice that night. Both times, when they knocked, the couple assured them everything was fine. Just a disagreement, nothing serious. But it was serious, dangerously serious. Now, think about this for a moment. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt trapped by your own lies? Where the story you built started to collapse and you didn't know how to stop it? That's where he was. And people in that position become unpredictable. By the end of the trip, only one would walk away.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.
The seventh morning started quietly. Too quietly. Housekeeping knocked on the door of the honeymoon suite at 10 a.m., the standard checkout time. No answer. They knocked again. Still nothing. The Do Not Disturb sign had been on the door since the night before, but checkout was checkout. Protocol required they at least announce themselves. The staff member used her key card and opened the door slowly, calling out as she entered. "Housekeeping? Hello?" The room was dark, curtains drawn. The air felt heavy, wrong. She stepped further inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. And then she saw them. 2 bodies, one on the floor near the balcony, one partially on the bed. She screamed and ran. Within minutes, resort security arrived, then local police, then investigators. The scene was chaos, not just from what had happened, but from what it represented. This was supposed to be a place of celebration, of new beginnings. Instead, it was now a crime scene. The mistress was dead. Evidence suggested blunt force trauma. The scene indicated a violent struggle, furniture overturned, lamps shattered, blood spatter on the walls. And him? Also dead. The evidence suggested he'd gone to the balcony afterward. The railing was just over 3 feet high, easy to climb, or to fall. Investigators worked quickly, documenting everything: photographs, measurements, evidence collection. The other guests were questioned, staff were interviewed. Everyone told the same basic story. The couple had been fighting, loudly, for days. One guest recalled hearing a woman screaming, "You used me! You lied to me! You were never going to leave her!" Another remembered hearing a man yelling back, "You knew what this was! Don't act like you're the victim here!" Then, sometime between 2 and 4 a.m., the sounds stopped. By sunrise, both were dead. Detectives began piecing together the timeline, trying to understand what had escalated a relationship from passion to violence in a matter of hours. But the biggest mystery wasn't what happened in that room. It was who these people really were. Because when investigators ran the man's identification and cross-referenced it with the resort reservation, they discovered something that turned the entire case on its head. He checked in under his real name, but the reservation was made for him and his wife. His actual wife, who was currently at home, waiting for him to return from his business trip so they could finally go on their honeymoon together. That's when investigators realized this wasn't just a murder. This was a betrayal so deep, so calculated, that it had ended in tragedy. Now I want you to stop and consider something. What drives someone to that point? To lie so completely, to deceive so thoroughly, that it destroys not just relationships but lives? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this question haunts every case like this. The survivor had a story, but the evidence didn't agree. Wait, survivor? Yes, that's where this case takes another turn. Because in the initial chaos, investigators missed something. There was a third person in that suite. Not dead, not injured, hiding in the bathroom, door locked, knees pulled to chest, phone clutched in hand.
When police finally cleared the bathroom and found him, a staff member who'd been inside the room, the entire investigation shifted again. But let's back up, because the story he told didn't match the evidence, and that's where everything became even more complicated. According to the staff member, he'd been called to the room around 1 a.m. for a maintenance issue, a broken lock on the balcony door. When he arrived, the couple was arguing but let him in. He started working on the lock when things escalated. They started screaming at each other, he told detectives. Then it got physical. I tried to leave, but he blocked the door, told me to fix the lock and get out. I was scared, so I went back to the balcony to finish. He claimed that while he was working, the fight intensified. He heard crashing sounds, a scream, then silence. That's when he locked himself in the bathroom and called security. But here's the problem. The timeline didn't match. Security logs showed no maintenance call to that room. The lock on the balcony door wasn't broken. It worked perfectly. And forensic evidence suggested the staff member's fingerprints were in places that contradicted his story. On the nightstand, on a bottle that had been used as a weapon, on the balcony railing. Investigators went deeper. They pulled phone records. His phone had been in contact with the mistress for weeks before the trip. Messages that suggested he knew her personally. Messages that implied a relationship beyond staff and guest. They reviewed resort security footage. He'd been seen entering and leaving the honeymoon suite multiple times over the course of the week, far more than any maintenance issue would require. And then they found the most damning evidence of all. Financial records showing that the mistress had paid him $3,000 3 days before the trip. The working theory began to take shape. The mistress had hired him for something. Maybe to scare the husband. Maybe to threaten him. Maybe to help her confront him in a way that would force his hand. But whatever the plan was, it had gone horribly wrong. Now investigators had to reconstruct what really happened that night. They interviewed every witness again. They analyzed every piece of physical evidence. They reviewed every text message, every email, every transaction. And slowly, the truth emerged. The fight between the husband and mistress had been real. The confrontation had been building for days, fueled by lies and broken promises and the suffocating realization that neither of them was getting what they wanted. But the staff member hadn't just been a witness, he'd been part of it. Whether he'd intended for anyone to die is still unclear, but his involvement was undeniable. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, the wife still had no idea any of this was happening. She'd received her husband's last text message that morning. "Meeting's going great. See you tomorrow. Love you." She'd responded with excitement, already mentally planning their first day together at the resort. And then 2 police officers knocked on her door. They asked if they could come inside. They asked her to sit down. And then they told her something that shattered her entire world. "Your husband is dead. He died at a resort in the Caribbean. He wasn't alone. He was with another woman." She couldn't process it. Husband? Dead? Another woman? "No," she said. "He's on a business trip. You have the wrong person." But they didn't. They showed her the reservation, his name, her last name, the dates that were supposed to be their honeymoon. "He went without me," she whispered, the realization crashing over her like a wave. "He went with someone else." Here's what I need you to understand. This wasn't just grief she was feeling. It was a grief mixed with betrayal so profound that it rewrote her entire history. Every memory, every promise, every moment of their relationship was now contaminated by the truth. Let me ask you this. How do you mourn someone who betrayed you? How do you grieve a person who wasn't who you thought they were? Take a second and really think about that. And that wasn't the only lie. 3 days after the bodies were discovered, arrests were made. The staff member was taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of manslaughter. Prosecutors argued that, while he may not have intended for anyone to die, his actions directly contributed to the deaths. The evidence was overwhelming. His DNA was found at the scene. His financial transactions with the mistress suggested premeditation. His conflicting statements to police showed consciousness of guilt. But the trial revealed even more disturbing details. Text messages between the staff member and the mistress showed they'd been planning a confrontation for weeks. She was frustrated, feeling used and discarded. She wanted leverage, something that would force the husband to leave his wife, or at least admit the truth publicly. The staff member had offered to help, not out of altruism, but because she was paying him $3,000 to be there, to back her up, to make sure the husband couldn't just walk away from the conversation. But neither of them anticipated how violent things would become. According to reconstructed testimony and evidence, the confrontation started verbally. The mistress demanded answers. The husband tried to deflect, then became defensive, then angry. The staff member, who was supposed to just be intimidating presence, got involved. Words were exchanged. Shoving began. And then it escalated beyond anyone's control. The defense argued that the staff member panicked, that he never intended for anyone to get hurt, that he was just trying to de-escalate when things went wrong. But the prosecution painted a different picture. A man who knowingly inserted himself into a volatile situation, who accepted money to help orchestrate a confrontation, and who, when things turned deadly, tried to save himself instead of calling for help immediately. The jury heard testimony from resort staff who described the days of fighting. They heard from forensic experts who walked through the physical evidence. They heard from the wife, who had to sit in a courtroom and relive her husband's betrayal in excruciating detail. And they heard recordings of the 911 call made from the bathroom, where the staff member's voice could be heard saying, "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to scare him. I didn't think." The trial lasted 6 weeks. In the end, the jury found him guilty on both counts of manslaughter. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison. During sentencing, the judge made a statement that captured the horror of the entire case. 3 lives were destroyed in that room. 2 ended, and 1 will never be the same. This tragedy was born from deception, fueled by greed, and sealed by violence. The choices made by everyone involved, the husband, the mistress, and you, created a perfect storm of betrayal and death. The courtroom was silent. The wife sat in the back, her face expressionless. She'd already cried every tear she had. Public reaction was swift and divided. Some people felt sympathy for the wife, an innocent victim of her husband's lies. Others questioned why she didn't see the signs, as if betrayal always comes with a warning label. Some felt the mistress got what she deserved for pursuing a married man. Others argued she was a victim too, manipulated by someone who promised her a future he never intended to give. And the husband? Most agreed he was the architect of his own destruction. But none of that brought anyone back. None of that undid the damage. Let me ask you something. Do you think the staff member deserved 15 years? Was that justice? Or should it have been more or less? I want to hear what you think. Comment below.
After the trial, the cameras went away. The news cycle moved on. But the wife's nightmare didn't end. She had to return to an apartment filled with wedding gifts still in boxes, honeymoon luggage still packed by the door, a closet full of clothes her husband would never wear again. She had to explain to family and friends what happened, over and over, reliving the betrayal every time someone asked, "How are you holding up?" She had to decide whether to keep her married name or go back to her maiden name, whether to wear her wedding ring or take it off, whether to keep photos from the wedding or burn them all. Every decision was another reminder that her entire marriage had been a lie. In a rare interview months after the trial, she spoke publicly for the first time. "People keep asking me if I had any idea," she said quietly, "if there were signs I missed. And the truth is, I've replayed every moment of our relationship 1,000 times, looking for clues. And maybe there were some. But when you love someone, when you trust them completely, you don't see betrayal coming. You just don't." She paused, collecting herself. "The hardest part isn't that he died. It's that I never really knew him. The man I married, the man I thought I was building a life with, he didn't exist. And I have to grieve someone who was never real. How do you do that?" The interviewer had no answer. "People say I should be angry,"
she continued. "And I am. But I'm also heartbroken, and confused, and humiliated. I stood in front of everyone I know and promised forever to someone who was planning to betray me before we even left the reception. That doesn't just hurt, it destroys you." She's since moved to a different city, started over, changed her name back, slowly rebuilt a life that looks nothing like the one she thought she'd have. But the scars remain. She doesn't date, doesn't trust easily, struggles with the idea that someone could look her in the eye, say they love her, and be lying the entire time. "I'll never know what he was thinking," she said. "Why he married me if he didn't want to be with me. Why he went through with the wedding, the vows, all of it, just to throw it away days later. I'll never get those answers, and I have to find a way to live with that." Think about what that means for a moment. She doesn't just have to grieve, she has to grieve without closure, without understanding, without any of the answers that might make it hurt less. And here's the question I want you to sit with. Could you recover from this? If you were in her position, do you think you'd ever trust someone again? Let me know in the comments.
So where does that leave us? 3 people are gone, 2 dead, 1 forever changed. A marriage that lasted less than a week, a honeymoon that became a crime scene, lies upon lies upon lies, until the weight of it all collapsed into tragedy. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about deception, about the consequences of betrayal, about what happens when people treat other human beings as expendable. The husband thought he could have both women. The mistress thought she could force a choice. The staff member thought he could profit from chaos without consequences. And the wife thought she was marrying someone she knew. They were all wrong. I want to leave you with a few questions. First, would you ever recover from this kind of betrayal? Not just the infidelity, but the calculated deception, the honeymoon stolen, the lies told so casually, the complete disregard for another person's reality. How do you come back from that? Second, was this preventable? Were there red flags the wife missed, or was she simply dealing with someone skilled at deception? When does trusting someone become naivete, and when is it just love? Third, who deserves your sympathy in this story? The wife, obviously. But what about the mistress? She made choices too, but she was also lied to. Does being complicit in someone else's betrayal erase your right to be seen as a victim when it turns deadly? And finally, what would you have done if you'd been the friend, the family member, the person who somehow knew what was happening? Would you have spoken up? Or would you have stayed silent, telling yourself it wasn't your place? These are the questions that linger long after cases like this fade from headlines. Because this isn't just a story about a honeymoon gone wrong. It's a story about the damage we do when we treat other people's lives as collateral damage in our own selfish pursuits. If this story affected you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me, what shocked you most about this case? What would you have done differently if you were in any of these positions? And do you think justice was truly served? Hit that subscribe button if you want more deep dives into true crime cases that make you think, that challenge you to consider how quickly things can spiral when lies become lifestyle. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere, someone is being lied to right now. Someone is trusting the wrong person. Someone is about to have their world shattered. Maybe hearing this story will help them see the truth before it's too late. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, trust is sacred. Don't give it to people who treat it like a game. I'll see you in the next one.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.